Holidays and Heroes. Let's Celebrate Veterans Day by Barbara D. Robertis, narrated by Timothy Capp. On November 11th of every year, Americans celebrate Veterans Day. On this day, we honor our country's veterans, the men and women who have served in the United States Armed Forces. Cities and towns across America have parades and concerts. Schools have special assemblies. Many Americans spend time talking with family or friends who are veterans. Listening to their stories helps us appreciate all the ways they have served our country. Who are our veterans? Anyone who has served in one of the 5 branches, or parts, of the United States Armed Forces is a veteran. The 5 branches are Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Air Force. Men and women can join one of these branches of the military if they are United States citizens or legal permanent residents, high school graduates, at least 17 years old, and able to pass the physical exam. When members of the military complete their service, they are veterans. Anyone who dies or is killed while serving is also a veteran. The 5 branches of the Armed Forces. The Army is the oldest branch of the military. It was formed in June of 1775, during the early days of the American Revolution. The Army's job is to protect the United States and its allies, or friends, on land. For example, if an enemy attacks a city, the Army will move in to defend that city and drive out the enemy. To do this job, men and women in the Army use armor, such as tanks, air support, such as helicopters, and weapons, such as guns and missiles. The Navy was formed just a few months after the Army, in October of 1775. The Navy's job is to protect the right to travel freely on seas and oceans around the world. For example, if enemy ships attack, the Navy will drive away those ships or destroy them. To do this job, the women and men in the Navy use ships and submarines, fighter aircraft and aircraft carriers, and weapons and missiles. The Marine Corps was formed a few weeks after the Navy, in November of 1775. The main job of the Marine Corps is to protect seacoasts. Marines also serve as fast response teams in emergencies. For this reason, they are sometimes called America's 911 force, and they are experts at scouting out information about enemies. To do all their jobs, men and women in the Marine Corps are trained to operate everywhere, on land, in the air, and at sea. They use special equipment that includes amphibious vehicles that can travel both in water and on land, amphibious ships that can land on enemy territory, and heavy-lifting helicopters for moving troops and vehicles. The Coast Guard was formed in 1790. At that time, it was called the Revenue Cutter Service. In 1915, it became known as the United States Coast Guard. The main job of the Coast Guard is to offer help during emergencies in water. For example, if an airplane crashes in American waters, the Coast Guard will rush in to rescue everyone on board. Other jobs done by the women and men of the Coast Guard include conducting search and rescue operations, enforcing laws and boating safety rules, protecting ports and sea travel, and controlling illegal activities. To do these jobs, men and women in the Coast Guard use boats and ships, aircraft, and rescue stations on the shore. The Air Force is the youngest branch of the military. It was created in 1947. Before that time, it was a part of the Army called the Army Air Corps. The Air Force's job is to defend the United States and its friends in the air, in outer space, and in computer cyberspace. For example, An Air Force pilot might try to stop an enemy's advance by dropping bombs on roads or bridges. To do their jobs, women and men in the Air Force use fighter aircraft and bomber aircraft, tanker aircraft used for refueling other aircraft in the air, passenger and cargo aircraft, information gathering aircraft, and helicopters. They also use satellites, missiles, and computers. The role of the military in peace and in war. In times of peace, members of the military must be ready to defend our country at a moment's notice. So they are always improving their skills and learning new ones. A standby part of the military known as the National Guard is often called to help during natural disasters, such as fires, floods, and hurricanes. In times of war, members of the military work together and support each other. They look out for everyone on their teams, and they always try to rescue anyone captured or injured. The unspoken rule is, I have your back. Most importantly, members of the military look for ways to solve both small and large problems peacefully. As many of our military leaders have said, war is the last resort. Armistice Day. From 1914 to 1918, the First World War was fought. Over 4 million Americans served in this war. Finally, the warfare ended with an agreement to stop fighting, an armistice. People all over the world ran into the streets to celebrate when they heard the news. Crowds in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania celebrate the armistice announcement on November 11, 1918. The armistice went into effect at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. In other words, at 11 o'clock in the morning on the 11th of November, 1918. 1 year later, the United States celebrated the first Armistice Day on November 11, 1919. President Woodrow Wilson wanted people to honor the heroism of the Americans who had died in the war. Armistice Day becomes Veterans Day. Americans had hoped that the First World War would be the war to end all wars. But the time of peace that followed the war did not last. From 1941 to 1945, over 16 million Americans served in the Second World War. Then, several years later, the U.S. fought again in the Korean War. Marine Corps War Memorial, raising the flag on Iwo Jima during the Second World War. People suggested a new idea for Armistice Day. Instead of honoring only those who had died in the First World War, the holiday should honor all veterans, living or dead. So, in 1954, Armistice Day was changed to Veterans Day. Just like Armistice Day, Veterans Day is celebrated on November 11th. President Dwight D. Eisenhower signs the bill that created Veterans Day in 1954. Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and poppies. Veterans Day and Memorial Day are both national holidays that honor members of our armed forces. Memorial Day specifically honors those who died while serving our country. It is celebrated on the last Monday of May. On both holidays, many people wear red poppies. This tradition began with a poem written in 1915 by a Canadian officer, John McCrae. After he saw poppies blooming on soldiers' graves, he wrote, "In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below." From In Flanders Fields. Flanders Field, Belgium. Red poppies soon became a symbol of the sacrifice made by those who died in the war. Two veterans groups, the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars, began handing out poppies in the 1920s. When people receive poppies, they can give donations to help hospitalized, disabled, and needy veterans. So if we are given poppies, we can wear them with gratitude. How Americans support veterans. Since the days of the American Revolution, the government has given special support to members of the military and their families. The Department of Veterans Affairs helps veterans with many things, including healthcare, education, job training, and loans. If a veteran passes away, his or her family can request military funeral honors. Then, the Department of Defense will send an honor guard to present an American flag to the family and play taps. Other groups support veterans through donations from private citizens. These groups offer many services. For example, some provide service dogs. Some provide sports equipment and training for disabled veterans. Our veterans have sacrificed much for us. We show our gratitude by helping them in as many ways as we can. The Veterans Day National Ceremony. The Veterans Day National Ceremony is held every year at Arlington National Cemetery. This cemetery is the home of the Tomb of the Unknowns. 3 soldiers are buried here, one from the First World War, one from the Second World War, and one from the Korean War. These soldiers are unknown because they could not be identified when they died. They represent all American unknown soldiers. The tomb is guarded around the clock, every day of the year, by members of the Army. Being selected as a tomb guard is a high honor. During the Veterans Day National Ceremony, a wreath is placed at the tomb, usually by the President of the United States. A bugler plays taps. Then, veterans march with flags in a parade of colors, and speeches honoring our veterans are given. Members of the military, the families and friends of some of those buried at Arlington, and many regular American citizens attend this ceremony to show their respect for our veterans. Parade of Colors at the Veterans Day National Ceremony. Veterans Day Celebrations. Americans all across the country celebrate Veterans Day in many different ways. People display American flags outside their homes and businesses. Veterans march in parades through our cities and towns. Musicians play concerts of patriotic music. People attend freedom festivals and fairs. Fireworks light up the skies. Some restaurants offer free meals to veterans, and lots of people wear poppies pinned to their shirts or jackets. In schools, special Veterans Day events and programs are held. Students proudly honor family members and friends who are veterans. We listen to our veterans tell stories about their experiences. Filming, recording, or writing down these stories makes a lasting legacy for our veterans and for us. We can show our appreciation to active members of the military at any time of the year by writing letters, mailing packages, or simply saying thank you. Since 1775, members of the armed forces have had to fight in terrible wars and assist in countless disasters. These brave men and women train their minds and bodies to be ready at a moment's notice to defend and protect us. They love our country, our freedoms, and our people enough to risk their lives for us every day they serve in the military. This is why we honor our veterans. This is why we celebrate Veterans Day.